Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Department of Drug and Alcohol for Dauphin County's Underage Drinking Forum. My name is Kristen Varner, and I am the director here. And we're very excited tonight to be able to present this through Facebook Live. It will be eventually able to be viewed on YouTube, and really bring this to you virtually. We also do have an in-person component here this evening. But it's really important that we let you know why we're doing this event tonight, and partially because it is Recovery Month. September is Recovery Month. We're in the 29th year, and Recovery Month is really to highlight and to appreciate those individuals that are in recovery from substance use disorder and mental illness, and really to understand that treatment works, prevention also works and is effective, and people can and do recover. We have many events scheduled throughout September, being that we already started with some at the actually very end of August. We started with the Cultural Fest where we did a Leaf It Alone, or Leaf Drugs Alone, where children in the community wrote their names on leaves and placed it on a artificial tree, which is now hanging in the commissioner's atrium downtown. Then we had the very next day a kickball event, which was very well attended, even though it was raining. Tonight is our third event, which is the Underage Drinking Forum, and I will let Dion talk a little bit about that in just a moment. Followed by this weekend where we're going to have a kickball event at Seaboard Park, and we invite you all to come out and join us. That will be in conjunction with Hero in the Fight, and that is from 11 to 2. And we have a few other events scattered throughout the month. If you want to get onto our Facebook page, which is Dauphin County Drug and Alcohol Facebook, there's plenty of events. They're all listed there. Recovery Advocacy Day is one of them. We have a wrap-up picnic at the end of the month, and we also will be present at the food truck rally. But why we're here tonight is to talk about underage drinking and how it affects our community. It's a very timely topic. I do know from personal experience that when you find out that your child may have drank alcohol or is, using that type of a substance, sometimes you don't know what to do and where to turn. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions for you tonight. And without further ado, I will introduce Dion, who is our prevention supervisor, to talk a little bit about tonight's event. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Tonight's event is called Communities Talk to Prevent Underage Drinking. It was sponsored by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is also known as SAMHSA, to prevent underage drinking, which focuses on problem drinking and other substance misuse that negatively affects our communities and our youth. It helps increase public awareness of and action around the prevention of underage drinking. It's a key to making a difference. Just some information about how we got to this point. We are doing a needs assessment with Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, and one of our issues that came up was identified alcohol use, availability, and attitudes and beliefs and norms favorable to alcohol use. The risk factors are laws and norms favorable to use, poor family management, and perceived risk of use, as well as the contributing factors are lack of enforcement, rite of passage, lack of resources, and it being culturally acceptable. So we would like to change those issues so that people are aware of drug and alcohol use and are also aware of how to deal with youth in this issue. One of our identified programs of practice or services to deal with it is a town hall meeting, and that's what we wanted to use this forum for. So today we will have a presentation, and then we will also be able to ask some questions. So right now we will have Natasha Santawani come and introduce Amanda.
Hello, everyone. Amanda Jernigan currently serves in the role of Corporate Outpatient Director at Gaudenzia Incorporated. She has been working in the field since 1999 in a variety of settings, including children and youth, inpatient psychiatric facilities, and drug and alcohol. Amanda has a passion for trainings and does them throughout Pennsylvania for various organizations and at conferences. She has been an adjunct professor at Penn State Harrisburg since 2013. She and her husband enjoy running their nonprofit organization in which they raise money for canine programs in need. Without further ado, Amanda Jernigan.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending via Facebook Live. We're going to be talking about drug trends in general this evening, as well as alcohol, just to kind of give us an overview of what we're seeing in our area. I've been working with adolescents, I'm just going to say 20 plus years, not to embarrass myself, and the drug trends are always changing. So this is what we're seeing currently. That doesn't mean tomorrow something new is not going to hit the market and the trends are going to change. And I'm also going to provide some resources at the end for you that might be helpful. So, okay, now this isn't working. All right, excuse me. What's happening? First of all, there's different classes of drugs when we talk about drugs. Oh, sorry to move. Am I okay? Okay. So we have Scheduled 1, Scheduled 2, Scheduled 3, Scheduled 4, and Scheduled 5. The lower the number, so Scheduled 1, these are the drugs that are highly addictive, and then they kind of go down in classifications. So you may hear people talk about Scheduled 1 drugs if somebody has legal charges. It depends if it's a felony or misdemeanor, depending on the weight and the schedule of the drug that they're using. But some examples of Schedule 1 drugs are heroin, acid, marijuana is still considered a Scheduled 1 drug if it's over a certain weight. And then if you go down to Schedule 2, you see things like oxycodone and oxycontin. And Schedule 3 drugs are more of like steroids, ketamine, which is an animal tranquilizer. Scheduled 4 are your benzodiazepines, your Xanax, your Ativans. And Scheduled 5 is our over-the-counter medications, such as cough syrups, triple C's, things we're going to talk about today. So not shocking, one of the biggest adolescent drug trends we're going to talk about is marijuana. But what's important to understand about marijuana is it's not what your grandma used to smoke. What we're seeing now is drugs that are much more powerful, and they're made in labs, so they have a higher potency. And they, even from reputable dealers, there are such things as reputable dealers. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but that is still being mixed with other substances. And we're going to talk some about that in a minute. It's a common misnomer that marijuana is safe because it comes from the ground. But like I said before, it's not really being harvested from the ground. It's being made in labs, which again makes it more potent. So this is a breakdown. There's different strands of marijuana, and this is a breakdown. So we have the indica, which is the purple. We have the hybrid, which is the green, and we have the sativa, which is the red. And just to break that down a little bit more for you, so the sativa strain of marijuana is what we consider an energizing strain. So this makes you feel like you have a lot of energy and you can go, go, go. The indica is known to be more sedating, more relaxing, more calming. And then the hybrid, not surprising, is a cross-section of both. So depending on what the user is looking to achieve would depend on the strain of marijuana that they proceed to purchase. What we also know is that there's police bulletins that were being put out as back in 2019, and they're still being put out, of marijuana that's mixed with other substances, fentanyl, cocaine, and tramadol, which is a pain reliever, heroin, and methamphetamines. So even though it looks like weed, it smells like weed, there's other things in it, it's not uncommon for us to get a drug screen of multiple substances on someone who says they only use marijuana. Another way marijuana is manufactured and given out is in the form of waxes or dabs. This is made by, they put the shake or the leftover marijuana under butane high and mix it with some alcohol and burn it down. Depending on the way you cook it, you get these different types. You get shatter, butter, wax, crumble, resin, clear oil, rosin, and these dabs are oftentimes used by adolescents. The interesting part associated with this is the fact that the marijuana content is probably about 10 times as high as a regular marijuana cigarette or joint or blunt. So these take a lot longer to get out of the system of somebody who uses dabs. Excuse me. So dabbing is associated with the term 710. And that really, if you talk about marijuana, 420 is the synonymous thing we've always heard with marijuana. 420 day, 420 the hour, smoking hour. But if you turn 710 upside down, it spells oil, which is what you're cooking out of the marijuana. So it's kind of something to look for on people's like notebook doodles if you're in a school setting. Um, like text messages, they might say 710. And then I included some street names as well. Dabs are smoked a little bit different than regular marijuana. They're oftentimes smoked in a bong, electronic cigarettes, or vaporized. Depending on the type of wax, they will actually add it to a blunt and they will get a double high from it. Dabs have such a high content of THC that they cause different effects. So a lot of times people that use dabs feel like bugs are crawling on them. So you'll notice scratches or dig marks on their arms and face and neck. But in reality, it's just the marijuana. It's just so potent. Another way that they smoke them is what they call oil rigs. These are specialized glass bong systems, like the ones in the upper corner. They also have ones that look like juice boxes as a novelty that are sold online. Some people prefer to smoke things that way. Marijuana also comes in the form of edibles. This is a photograph that was taken from Dauphin County Juvenile Probation of an adolescent who was making his own edibles. He was taking the THC waxes and oils and putting them on Apple Jack cereal, breaking them down into little bags and giving them to his friends at school. What's appealing to kids about this is you don't get the marijuana taste or the smell. You're just getting the effects of marijuana and you're getting food. I have a 15-year-old, so teenagers in general love food. So it's not a big shock that that's how they enjoy their marijuana. There's a lot of things that come in the form of THC that we don't necessarily know. Brownies is kind of like the old standby that's been around since the beginning of marijuana time. But we see decorative cakes being sold, peach rings, candy, things of that nature, chocolate, caramels. All of this contains THC. So you have to take a close look of what you see. Other things that we've gotten, we had a couple of kids here in Dauphin County who have been caught with these, they're called medicated nerds on a rope. These are THC-laced nerds candy in a rope form, but if you look at it quickly, your eye's drawn to the word nerds and rope, which isn't uncommon. It's the small word above it where it says medicated that it shows it's marijuana. Other things that they're using are THC-infused toothpicks. These come in different milligrams, and you can get them with the same three, the sativa, the indica, or the hybrid. And you can put them in your mouth and chew on them, and nobody would be any wiser. So everyone always says that marijuana is super safe. There's no a chance of overdose. And what we're finding is that's actually not true. A number of our local hospitals have been treating adolescents for cannabinoid hyperemesis, which is called CHS. This is some of the symptoms that we see this in kids who long-term smoke, yet use every day. They get a lot of belly pain, hard, like sharp cramps. They get a lot of nausea and vomiting. For some reason, nobody seems to know why. If you take a really hot shower, all of a sudden you feel better. So that's kind of how it goes. But there's no single test that confirms this diagnosis. We're just seeing kids show up in the ER with this symptom, this series of symptoms, and this is what they're being diagnosed as having. Synthetic marijuana, I wish I could say it went away. This is a terrible drug. It's misnoming and misleading the fact that it's really not marijuana. It's actually all sorts of dried plant materials sprayed with a chemical compound, subdivided into these packaging, and then shipped out for consumption. Not made here in the United States, oftentimes made in India, China, shipped over here. No quality control, clearly. But what we know is that it comes in a lot of different forms. When it first hit the streets, I first saw it back in 2009, really become prominent in our area. It was coming in these colorful packagings. This one, it's hard to see. That's Osama bin Laden in a bathroom. One of the prominent brands at the time was Space. But now we're seeing it packaged differently. This was taken in Steelton, Pennsylvania, which is not far from where I'm standing right now. I think I actually might be in Steelton. But anyway, they're not packaged with any kind of colorful label. They're colored in black and red packages. What they're doing is buying it in bulk and then subdividing it and oftentimes mixing it with other things. There's also comes in black packages with big labels and large storage containers that they then subdivide and hand out. This is a scale that the dealer was using to measure it out and go that way. So to show you the difference between marijuana and synthetic marijuana, I just put up this slide quickly. So when somebody's using synthetic cannabinoids or synthetic marijuana, they get really high blood pressure that hits them up into stroke range. So that's pretty significant. They're still going to have the dilated pupils and the red glazed eyes that we see with normal marijuana. But this is interesting, and they lose the ability to speak most of the time. Their heart rate gets really, really rapid, and we know that long-term use of synthetic marijuana leads to kidney failure. And that's pretty scary because you can't go to like Sam's Club and get new kidneys. So you have to be very wise about synthetic marijuana. I wanted to touch on CBD because this is something I hear a lot about from the kids, and this is something that's at almost every convenience store cash register I go to, Turkey Hill, Sheetz, anything. So what we have to understand is that cannabis CBD oil is legal in Pennsylvania, but only if it's below a certain percentage. The issue becomes is it's not listed on the packaging how much it actually contains. If it contains more of what is a legal standard, you're going to get a positive THC screen on people who ingest these. So CBD is a cousin of the marijuana plant, and it's a component of marijuana. It doesn't itself cause a high in small doses. So this is a pretty big issue, and nobody really is doing a lot with it because, again, unless you send each of these out to a lab, you're not going to know the chemical compound and the consistency of it. But this is really looking at where the CBD comes from. You can buy CBD products online. You can buy them at, like I said, grocery stores, mini marts. But you have to make sure that it's below a certain amount, and that's protected under the Farm Bill, which went into effect in 2014. So this is part of an issue that is bigger. So if somebody's using this for, I don't know, stomach aches, sometimes I hear that, or sleep, then, and it's higher than it's supposed to, and then either a probation officer or the school screens them, they might test positive. So that could put you in a bad spot. So it has to contain less than 0.3% of THC in order for it to be legal in Pennsylvania. And again, this is not marked clearly on the bottles when you go to this. There's a grocery store on the West Shore called the Healthy Grocer. I went in there, they had a whole wall of CBD oil, and none of it was marked with what was the actual percentage in it. So you run that risk when you buy this kind of stuff. THC vaping. So interesting about THC vapes. A lot of kids vape. A lot of kids think it's safer than smoking. But the thing with THC vapes is most of them are odorless. So I could be standing next to an adult, a parent, a probation officer, a teacher, and I could be vaping and they wouldn't even know that's what I was vaping was THC. There's a lot of different kinds of them. This one's called Triple X. This one's called Dank. Venom is a really popular one, and I'm going to show you a couple more. So the most popular one is cookies. I actually got an email from a probation officer who's one of her probationers came into her office the first day of school wearing a cookies t-shirt, and he was kind of surprised that she knew what that was. But these kids wear these clothing, and they go to school, and they're kind of advertising what they're doing to other students. So these you can buy. They have a certain percentage of THC in them, and you're able to vape them. You can buy these online. You can buy these at smoke shops if you know what you're asking for. With vaping, we know that there's a condition that can happen called EVALI. In 2019, we had 1,888 cases of it associated with vaping, where young people and young adults were in the hospital, and some of them had actually died. So you're not supposed to use, obviously, the vapes if you're under a certain age, and I believe they've raised it to 21, or they are raising it to 21. But you're not supposed to do that and do that multiple times because it causes irreversible damage to your lungs. The second part of the valai that they don't talk about is something that's alluring to children is they add flavors to this so it doesn't taste terrible. So you can get bubblegum, vanilla, cherry, all these different flavors. But when you add flavor to stuff, you actually develop what's called popcorn lung. Popcorn lung originated because of back in the 80s or 90s, we had microwave popcorn with flavors. And the people in the factory were developing this condition where they were getting abscesses in their lungs and they would burst and their lungs would fill with blood and they would suffocate and die. What they're finding is the same things in the e-cigarettes that gives the flavoring is causing the same conditions, which is part of the valai. Another drug trend we see with teenagers is triple C's. A lot of our adolescents work in grocery stores, drug stores, and have access to this stuff. If you've gone to buy this anytime recently, you know you have to provide a driver's license in order to get certain cold medications because of the active ingredients that they contain. Some of that is due to methamphetamine manufacturing, but a lot of it is due to teenagers abusing corticedin. So corticedin is an over-the-counter medication that we often take when we have colds, flus, things like that. It contains an active ingredient called DXM or dextromorphan. Dextromorphan, when you take it in high doses, causes you to have hallucinations, and that's appealing to adolescents. There's a lot of street names associated with this: Orange Crush, Red Devil, Skittles, Robo-Tripping, Candy, and each one of these contains 30 milligrams of the DXM in the high blood pressure kind. That's what's desired by the adolescents. Just regular corticedin without the high blood pressure has lower, they 10 or 15 milligrams depending on what you're getting. So you can see that they get a lot more bang for their buck, so to speak. If we see a lot of adolescents with retail theft charges, this is often something associated with that. And a big indicator if somebody's abusing this is going to be these are stored in blister packs. So the packs come with foil on the back. And when adolescents use them, they pop out the pills. I had a kid who was using 30 of them a day. She actually fell down the stairs and broke her leg while she was supposed to be babysitting children. Another common trend is the same active ingredient that's in corticedin is also in some of our cough syrups like Delsum and Robitussin. And what the kids do is they actually drink this. They drink it by the bottle full. I don't know how you do it. The only one that tastes halfway decent is Delsum. Everything else is hard to choke down. They oftentimes will take syringes, not take the needles off the bottom, and fill up the tube and shoot them like shots at parties. So this is a very common thing where you see a bowl of these being passed around and people just take them as shots. Again, this is relatively inexpensive. It's not coming from a drug dealer. These are things you might have in your home, things we kind of take for granted. So they acted when they're on it, it makes them feel like they're on PCP or ketamine, and they get a long high off of it, about 6 hours. So that's pretty appealing to adolescents, is they can take, a whole bunch of these. When you first start taking these, they recommend you start taking 8 of them online at a time in order to achieve this high. But I've had people take 16, 30, in the 20s in order to get the high they want. So it's not uncommon to see tons of blister packs and empty bottles. Lean, I wanted to touch on this because we're still seeing this, unfortunately, with adolescents. So if you've ever had bronchitis, you go to the doctor. He oftentimes prescribes a medication called promethazine, which is a cough syrup. Most of us can take it for like a night or two, and then all of a sudden we're up with insomnia because that's what happens when you take promethazine. But it's relatively cheap when we get it. It's about $8 a bottle on the street. An ounce of promethazine goes for about $100 an ounce. So they can take what we don't use and sell it on the street. So what you do is you take the promethazine and you mix it with Sprite and Jolly Ranchers to take out the awful taste. Promethazine cough syrup tastes terrible. And they usually serve it in styrofoam cups and they start stacking the cups. The reason it's called lean is because it literally makes you lean to the side the more that you drink it. And it slows down your breathing and your heart rate. So if you mix this with other substances such as marijuana or alcohol, you're really running the risk of overdose and death. This is something they call purple drink on the street. You'll see some clothing later that'll show us more of that in a second. There's a lot of rap songs that actually bring out and talk about this. There was one rapper in particular, Lil Wayne, who was made pretty famous. He had 8 seizures in one day from drinking lean, and he got famous for it. Don't ask me why. But there's also people who've actually died from it. So promethazine has codeine in it, which is the active ingredient, which is part of that disassociative feeling that people seek when they drink it. But these are some of the songs in which they highlight it, just so you know what your adolescents and teens are listening to. So this is a really interesting trend. Vanilla extract, any of the extracts contain very high alcohol content. So what we started to see is adolescents are mixing this into coffee and then taking it into school because of the amount of alcohol content in it. Like rubbing alcohol, I believe the alcohol content is between 35 to 70 proof, depending on which kind you get. And then you mix that in with your coffee and nobody knows the difference. It just smells strongly of vanilla and people can get drunk right in front of you. You could also drink rubbing alcohol and get the same effect, but that doesn't taste as good. So this is another alternative. This one makes my heart hurt to say this out loud, but LSD is back again. We're seeing LSD a lot in adolescents, typically around 17 or 18 years of age. They, for whatever reason, think that this is something, most of the kids I've come in contact with, this is what they want to do on their 18th birthday. I just usually like to go out to dinner for my birthday, but I'm also not 18. But this is a trend that we're seeing a lot of, unfortunately. What we do know is that LSD causes a lot of physical effects such as sweating, increased heart rate, your body temperature goes up to about 106 degrees, which is pretty dangerous. It starts to cook your organs, which is not good. You sweat and become dehydrated. If you use it long enough, they can get psychologically addicted. We see some psychosis forming in people. If they have a bad trip, they can have flashbacks that last forever, and depression. When you're actually on it and you're tripping, you see things, like your sensory distortion. So people say that you can feel colors and, hear, like, it's just insane. Paranoid, and there's extreme euphoria associated with it. Interesting factoid about LSD, if you're drug testing for this drug, you have to wrap the sample in aluminum foil. LSD breaks down in light, so make sure that you're doing that. For a long time, we couldn't drug test in urine drug screens for LSD. We actually had to do a spinal tap. That was the only way to test for LSD, but we are able now to use urine drug screens. Certain parts of Dauphin County, we are seeing crystal meth being utilized by adolescents. There's a lot of allure to this, so it comes in different colors, which is very cool to kids. It's oftentimes mixed in with other drugs, like we talked about with the marijuana. But meth is one of those weird drugs. The first time you use it, you're pretty much addicted most of the time. And it's the only drug that really affects every one of our organs at the same time. So this is just to kind of break it down of how meth affects everything in our body, our movements, our heart, our liver, everything is being brought down. Another one of these weird drugs that actually raises your body temperature and makes you sweat. When you're coming off of it, you can get into this dangerous thing called tweaking, which is an extremely dangerous time for people if you don't know what that is. And it comes in a lot of different forms. Sometimes we see it pressed into pill form, sometimes it's in a powder, and sometimes it's in a crystal form, which is called ice. And this can be changed in color to pinks, blues, yellows, greens, anything that you want in order to allure kids into it. There's a lot of different street names associated with methamphetamine. There's a lot of different ways to make methamphetamine. We've all seen the show Breaking Bad. If you haven't, you probably want to watch an episode or two so you know what I'm talking about. But we have traditional meth labs where they're made in homes, RVs, trailers, and then they have what's called the shake and bake method where they make it in Gatorade bottles and they drive around in the car for 45 minutes and then they have meth. That's a desirable method because meth labs have an odor associated with them, which sometimes gets people caught. The shake and bake method is desirable because you just drive around, wind the windows down, drive around for 45 minutes, and boom, you have meth. But it doesn't produce as much as a lab, so that's kind of the downside to it. We also have liquid meth, which is sometimes used in prisons to send in on cards, greeting cards, letters to prisoners so they can sell it and trade it for different things in jail. So opiates, the most commonly abused opiates that we see oftentimes are heroin, morphine, codeine, fentanyl, meperidine, oxycodone, hydrocodone, hydromorphone, and oxymorphone. A lot of these medications that we get come innocently enough to our adolescents, and from there, problems come. You have an adolescent who's an athlete and he blows out his knee and has ACL surgery. That's a pretty significant surgery with a lot of pain associated with it. These kids get put on medication. You go to get your wisdom teeth out and they give you a prescription of Vicodin for pain management instead of like Tylenol or things like that. Dentists have gotten a little bit better. There are some guidelines about what they can and cannot prescribe. But pain medications are pretty easily accessible, especially with some of the injuries that adolescents get. From that, kids become addicted to the pills, and that grows out to heroin addictions, unfortunately. So, I have some statistics here. So 33% of 8th graders and 41% of 12th graders felt that there's a great risk in taking prescription drugs, so that's good news. But there's a lot of non-medical use that's directly linked to medical use. So if somebody's prescribed something, let's say you have an injury, you blew out your knee, and your buddy plays football and he hurt his shoulder, and you're like, oh, I got you, I'll give you a Vicodin, you'll feel better. They give each other medications that way. 80% of high school students and 44% of middle school students have personally witnessed drug-related activity at their school. And the narcotic prescription drug use is higher than the national rate in 8th and 12th graders specifically. So that's kind of a scary trend. Where kids get opiates most of the time, it comes from a family member that they took in the home. Sometimes as adults, we get pain medications for an injury or surgery. We take a couple, we don't like the way they make us feel, and they go in the medicine cabinet, and we forget about them. It's really important that we use drug take-back programs to take back medications that we aren't using to get them out of the home. Sometimes they're given to people by family members. I've had cases of this where kids are feeling, like they hurt themselves. They have this, they have that. They have a parent who's on medications and the parent gives them to them. 18% of the kids are buying them from someone else on the street. 10% of them stole them from somebody either in the neighborhood that they knew was on them. 9% of the kids took them from a relative, and 6% bought them online. So there are kids who buy things online and have them shipped directly to them. So what's the risk factor associated with this outside of the fact that they're taking an opiate is the fact that there are fake pills on the market, and these pills are made to look exactly like Vicodins, Percocets, any benzodiazepines, Xanax, but they're pressed to look like them, and they actually are 100% pure fentanyl. So when you think you're buying something, you think you're getting a Vicodin, let's say, and let's say that you were taking 2 of them, you take 2 of these, you end up dead of an overdose. So if you look at them, some of the things that we can tell if something is a pressed pill or not is the edges will not be as clean as pills that are manufactured in a factory. The color's usually slightly off. The logo that's on most of these pills will be slightly off. It'll either be crooked, it won't be as standard on. But these are what they call is Operation Blue Death. So these are fentanyl-laced pills of oxycodone that were being sold in the Philadelphia area, but they have been here in this area as well. I'm going back in time. If you remember Prince was a musician. Prince overdosed and died. He thought he was buying Vicodin on the street because he had a Vicodin addiction. He actually bought fentanyl and he died. So let's talk about alcohol. Alcohol is classed as a depressant, which means that it slows down our vital functioning. And as a result of that, speech usually gets slurred, and our motor function gets slowed down as well. Part of this is it affects our mind. It makes us not feel like we're ourselves. And I think it's ironic because we advertise things like happy hour and happy hour drinks. Well, people are happy for about a half an hour, and then they're crying about their dog that died when they were 7. So the irony of all of that is the fact that it's actually a depressant. So people think alcohol helps them have a good time, helps them relax in social situations. But in actuality, alcohol isn't doing any of those things. This is just a breakdown to give you an idea of how much alcohol content is in standard drinks. So in beer, you see 2 to 6% of an alcohol content. Hard ciders, you see a 4 to 8% alcohol content. Wine, depending on the type of wine, is 8 to 20%. Tequila contains 40% alcohol. Rum contains 40% alcohol. Brandy is about 40% or more. Gin, about 40 to 47%. Whiskey, 40 to 50%, depending on the brand. Vodka is about 40 to 50%, and any of the liqueurs, so like chocolate liqueurs, mint liqueurs, those types of things are about 15 to 60, depending on the liqueur. Why is this important? Adolescents have no idea how much alcohol is in the things that they drink. What's important to them is if they taste good, they look good, they're fruity, those types of things. So I think this is just a gross realization of how much alcohol content is in some of these things. We have a local brewery here in our area called Trogs. Trogs Brewery has a beer called Mad Elf that they sell at the holidays. That contains a 9.9% alcohol content. That's very minimal compared to one of these other things, but is much higher in the beer category. So why do teens drink? So teens are particularly vulnerable to alcohol because as they become more independent, they tend to involve themselves in more risk-taking behaviors because it's a thrill, it's something exciting to do. And this might include drinking alcohol. Most of our teens begin to be more self-conscious, so they think that drinking or pre-gaming makes them feel more comfortable in social situations oftentimes. And the media also sometimes hypes this up as a big important thing. A lot of shows that our kids watch and love, I'm thinking of the show Outer Banks. Outer Banks is a great show, but a lot of the time is spent with kids drinking on that show that are underage. They feel like they have to experiment in order to fit in with their peers. They use it sometimes to cope with uncomfortable feelings like depression and anxiety. And a lot of times we see this as big transition times, high school graduation, middle school transition to high school. Um, going to college. College is another place where we see a lot of binge drinking. So I pulled some statistics, and I know these are hard to see, but I could only take print screens of them. But what this is basically showing us is here in Dauphin County that the kids that are in 2017 is the light blue, 2015 is this color blue, and then 2019 is this color blue. But what this shows us is the majority of the kids that access alcohol binge drink, which means they drink a lot of alcohol in a short amount of time and they drink it really fast. So I thought that was an interesting statistic. And then this other slide, I know it's hard to see, so I'm just going to translate it for you. But this shows us where our kids are getting the alcohol from. And I thought this was, again, extremely interesting. But a majority of the alcohol with the highest numbers that we see are kids getting it from their parents. Followed up secondly by like friends or other people over 21 who get them alcohol. So I thought that was a pretty interesting statistic. So a lot of consequences that are associated with alcohol that we see for adolescents in particular are alcohol-related fatalities. This includes traffic crashes, which are a leading cause of death in adolescents. Second, drownings. So kids who think they're swimming dive into a pool, hit their head, fall unconscious, and drown because everyone around them is drunk. Suicide, and then sometimes homicides, depending on the situation. But most of those have been linked to alcohol use. We also see an increase in sexual activity for teens. So teens who tend to drink become sexually active earlier, which causes the higher risk of STDs, teenage pregnancy, all sorts of problems. Kids who drink also have an increase in school problems, so they might have more disciplinary problems at school, they might have more academic problems at school, they might have more attendance issues at school, and they might develop alcoholism. For every year we delay the onset of use, we are decreasing the likelihood of a lifelong alcoholism or drug addiction. So if you start at 12, 13, 14 years old, you're increasing the chances of developing a lifelong addiction. People who drink oftentimes commit more violent crimes, they may be hurt in a violent crime, such as a rape, assault, a robbery, those types of things. So what to look out for? Marketing is not the best thing for the world of adolescence because what marketing does is it really appeals to children for things that children and adolescents should not have access to. One of the biggest things that I'm seeing now is the White Claws and a lot of these flavored drinks like the Bud Light Seltzer, the Malibu drinks. So this is appealing to adolescents because you don't have to be a bartender or know what goes in these drinks. They're already mixed up for you in a can or in a bottle. Four Locos, that's a very common thing. What we're also seeing as a trend is taking vodka and adding Skittles to it and making it different colors and different flavors that way. And also Red Bull. Red Bull's an energy drink, but if you mix it with different things like vodka and gin, you get different different drinks out of it, which again is appealing to kids. This next one is the one that scares me the most. Adolescents love energy drinks for the most part. When I was running adolescent services, we were not allowing them to have any kind of energy drink because of the epinephrine. It's not good for adolescents in general and their hearts. But now we have to be more important and more careful because these are now being sold and they contain alcohol. So energy drinks, you can go into the sheets and into the places that sell alcohol, and you can find Rockstar 21. You can find Spark. And these actually are this, if you look at them quickly, they all look like regular drinks that we see in the stores, but they do contain alcohol. So if you're not paying attention in a classroom setting at school, if you're not paying attention at home, your kids could be drinking right in front of you. You have no idea. I don't know if this is true or not, but the kids told me, a couple of the kids who later got arrested, but they told me that the beer cooler, the back door by the beer cooler at the sheets at all locations is never locked. So they go in the back door, go into the beer cooler, take the liquor out, and then leave. So they do get caught later, but at the time, just, they're able to get alcohol pretty simply. Another thing that's important to look at is how much alcohol is really in these energy drinks and how much that affects people. So in the Sparks, it's equivalent to about one beer, but this other one, which is called Juice with the J, that is the alcohol equivalent to one bottle of wine in one energy drink. So just take a minute to let that sink in. It's important to have conversations about drinking, not just about drinking, but drugs in general. I think it's really important to normalize this discussion in your household. Make this a topic that everyone can talk about without feeling like they're in trouble or it's bad. I think we began the conversation with our son mainly because of what we did at the time. My husband worked as a probation officer at the time. I was working in this field for a long time. So we normalized the discussion. I remember my mom being like, don't tell him stuff like that. He's going to get in trouble at school. But, he comes to us now and says, so and so did this over the weekend, or this person was smoking weed. And, he is more open about it because we've made it a normal discussion in our house. But if you're going to have these discussions, you want to figure out what your teenager's viewpoint is, especially on alcohol. What do they think about alcohol? What do they think alcohol is? Do they have any interest in trying it if they haven't done it already? We want to take the time to debunk myths. And if we don't know, say we don't know and research it and get back to the teen. Don't just make up an answer to sound like we know everything. That could be the worst thing that we do because teenagers are sneaky and they test us. We want to discuss reasons why we shouldn't drink. So we want to explain the risks of teen drinking. We want to explain the risks of possible long-term effects to your brain. We want to discuss any family history of alcoholism. And, we want to have that open discussion. We want to work with our teens to have a way to plan for peer pressure. How are you going to deal with it? If somebody asks you to go out to a party and drink, if somebody asks you to go and try this drug, how are you going to handle that? And last but not least is be prepared for questions. You can't have a conversation and not have questions at the end and expect to get stumped. We've all been there. Even I've been there. I sometimes, whenever my nephew's involved, I get a little cringy because he always asks me the hard questions. Some of the last stuff I wanted to cover was clothing trends, especially if you are in a setting where you work with teens. There's some things you need to be aware of. So there are a lot of clothing trends where they promote drugs and alcohol use, or they provide hidden pockets for people to hide drugs in. A lot of these clothing, parents buy their kids for back to school shopping and don't even realize what they're buying them for. So I thought we'd spend a couple minutes on that. So one of the big companies that we see is this company called Seedless. Seedless is a company that provides a lot of clothing with hidden pockets. It's usually on a seam, either in the seam of the pants, seam of a hat, seam of a hoodie. But this is promoting marijuana smoking along with those hidden pockets. Our brains are unique in the fact that we're trained to associate certain images with certain things, and our brain just like passes because it's such a common thing. This t-shirt here is advertising for Colorado, but if you look at it closely, it's the label of Jägermeister. So when you look at it quickly, your brain goes to Jägermeister, but in reality, it's promoting marijuana use by talking about Colorado where marijuana use is legal. This is a belt with hidden pockets. This lady has money in it, but you can also put a stash in it. But if you look at it, it just looks like a regular belt that any kid would wear to hold their pants up if they're interested in holding their pants up, which not all teens are. The reason I showed you this is to drive home the point about images. Marilyn Monroe is an image that everyone knows. And when your brain sees it, you're just like, oh, Marilyn Monroe, and you keep rolling. But if you look at this closely, Marilyn Monroe is representing the gang, talking about drugs and money. Over here, this is Marilyn Monroe with Tupac. Tupac was a rapper. He was shot and killed on the street. He was a notorious gang member. Here's Marilyn Monroe dressed in red, which is a common color associated with the Bloods gang. So this is somebody representing their colors in your school, in your group settings, which can cause turmoil if there's multiple gangs associated. Here's Marilyn Monroe again with marijuana leaves on her gloves, on her bandana, again promoting that. But again, all of our brains see is Marilyn Monroe. So just some other things. These are concealment shoes. These are made by a company called Supra. You actually have a pocket in the tongue of your shoe with a zipper compartment. In there you can keep your weed, you can keep your pills, you can keep whatever, and then nobody would be any wiser. They're usually in a high top form. These are black ones with blue laces. I've seen these a lot. They kind of, if you're old like I am, there was a shoe company back in the day called Kangaroos. This is sort of similar, except the pocket's much bigger for drugs. In Kangaroos, you could probably put like a quarter in your kangaroo shoe. For those who can't afford the super shoes, this man made his own, so we give him mad props. His is not that well, but he took the insole out. He's got heroin bags stuck in the heel of his shoe. They're right here. And then this guy, he really took it to a new level. He sliced the sole of his shoe, and he has like hidden cell phones, bags of drugs up here. He's taking it to a whole new level. So these would be common in kids who were dealing and also in young adults in like a work release program because they would try to get this stuff into the program, especially cell phones. This is another clothing brand company you need to watch out for called No Bad Ideas. So this is actually a hat company. And when you flip down the front of the hat, it has a concealment pocket in the front brim of the hat. So they call it 420 headwear. It has a hidden stash pocket. Again, parents are buying this for their kids, not thinking anything of it. DGK, it started in 2003. It's an acronym for the word Dirty Ghetto Kids. It's extremely popular among the skateboarding population, and they're openly promoting drug use everywhere on all of their stuff. Some of it is blatant, while others of it is hidden more. And a lot of people, if you don't know what that means, wouldn't give it a second look. Here's Seedless again, some more of the things. This is one of their hidden pocket concealment hoodies that they sell. The pockets are on the side down here. And then they also have the concealment hats as well. And everything in their thing talks about seedless, which is a reference to marijuana and not having seeds in it. Remember I talked about lean and the cups. There's also a brand of clothing associated with this that we've seen a lot of kids in. This is probably the most popular shirt I've seen in adolescent wear. I've seen 4 or 5 kids wear this shirt. It's a purple tie-dye, and on the chest it has the 2 styrofoam cups leaning to the side to associate that with the word lean. There's other hats that have it with like a sad face. Um, just another example. These I found on Amazon, and some of the kids were wearing these. Sometimes these bracelets are popular among certain groups of adolescents, but they look like those paracord bracelets, but in actuality, it's a marijuana bowl. It's called a danklet. Now, these are for sale on Amazon for $8.99. Now, you can buy these at festivals and shows, but you can just go on Amazon and have it shipped right to your house. So when you pull it apart, the one end is the bowl, and the other end is the mouthpiece where the bead is. This one is like one of my favorites. This is a hoodie vape. So you put your THC cartridge on one side of your hoodie and then they run a tube like the string of it over to the other side. So you can just pull it out and puff on it when like the teacher turns their back or does these different things. So that's pretty inventive. I find these fascinating. This one of the POs found. I have not seen these in person, but they also make a vape watch. It looks just like an Apple Watch, but in it you put the cartridge and then you can smoke that way. And then marijuana sunglasses where you flip up the label on the side and there's a bowl and you smoke through the earpiece, the piece that goes in the back of your ear. We also see a lot of adolescents who are what we call latchkey kids who go home after school to empty house. Having a key holder in your backpack doesn't look like a big deal. We assume they have the key to their home to get in later, but in it they're stashing their drugs is a big one. This one is great too. This is a diversion water bottle. The water bottle looks a lot taller than it actually is. Only about a third of it or 2/3 of it is a water bottle. The rest is an empty compartment where you can put your drugs in, carry this right into the school setting, go into the bathroom where they don't have cameras, deal what you need to do, walk back out with your water bottle. These are older. Not a lot of cars have cigarette lighters anymore, but when they used to, they would hide the pills in the container. It would screw on, and you would just stick it in your cigarette lighter. This one is new, and this one is fascinating. This is called a puffet, and a puffet is made to look just like an asthma inhaler. And it actually is the same concept as a vape or an e-cigarette. So it lights up and it heats up and it has the vape oil in it. And you can just walk down the street puffing on your inhaler, but you're actually smoking weed. How many times have we walked by people using an inhaler and haven't given it a second thought? This would be a little bit harder in a school setting because I don't think you're allowed to walk around with inhalers in school, but just something to be aware of. I looked it up online. They sell them online and they're $119.99 and you can have them shipped right to your house today. So I've even taken it as far because I'm a little bit crazy. I will take it as far as putting it in my cart and trying to check out with these items, and they never ask you for an age, which I find fascinating. So, useless tidbit of information. I've provided a lot of additional resources. So a lot of different resources are available for parents on drugabuse.gov. This is how to talk to your teens about drugs, those types of things. Great, helpful pamphlets. For schools, there's a lot of different resources to have available in your guidance offices, in your counseling offices. If teens want to learn more, they can learn a lot about drugs on the teensdrugsabuse.gov website. I included other resources with the Alcohol Facts Week. So there's alcohol awareness weeks that school districts can do, how to promote that, what kind of information to provide. This is a resource that I don't think a lot of people realize, but the Pennsylvania State Police has a really great resource available with up and coming things that they see. You can access this. This is public information if you go to that website. I always like to snoop around and see what's new and exciting. I put together a whole list of resources regarding underage drinking and specifically where you can access information just by clicking on these links. I included both high school and middle school and college age as well. Just a lot of resources if you're talking about prevention programs, how to have these conversations to help you. The last thing I will say is I recommend that whoever is providing services to adolescents gets a good yearly training on drug trends because like I said, they change every day. Just when I think I've heard it all, I see the puffet, right? And I just learn these new things all the time. Some of the best ones that I've seen are one by a guy. He's a retired undercover police officer, super tall guy. His name's called Tall Cop Says Stop. You can go online, sign up for his in-person trainings with COVID. A lot of them are available online. He knows all the trends. He's out on the street talking to people. He's extremely knowledgeable. He's fantastic. Penn State Health also does programs called Drugs 101, where they'll come out to schools and do programs. They were doing that pre-COVID. I'm not sure what COVID land looks like, but they would actually bring out a mock teenage bedroom, and they would walk through parents how to find different things that might indicate drug or alcohol use in a teen's bedroom. And then the teens go through a series of stations. They met with me, they met with the coroner, they met with probation, and we kind of walked them through how we do things. There was life flight nurses there. They had a drunk driving simulator there. It was pretty cool, but they would go to your school if you contacted them and put this on for your programs. So I'm not sure what they're doing in COVID, but you might want to reach out to them to see because they have a lot of grant money for things like that, and they also have a ton of resources. So that is what I have for my presentation. So I'm going to shut this so we can bring it up here for questions. Okay. And I'm going to turn this magical thing off. Maybe. There we go. Okay.
Questions for you, Amanda. Can you just emphasize a little bit more for parents on how they can play a role in the issues with underage drinking?
So I think the biggest thing is making it a conversation in your house and making it okay to talk about. I think that for the most part, my experience has been that we don't want to talk about drugs and alcohol, and when we do that, we send the message to our kids that it's bad and it's wrong and we shouldn't talk about it. Whereas I think it's better to keep that conversation open and talk about it. The other thing, I think that some parents are under the idea that it's safer if kids drink at their house, they have more control over it, but in reality it's illegal, A, and B, that's not the message we want to send our kids. So we want to make sure that they understand that, you know, they're potentially opening themselves up to years of problems by starting early. So kind of sending those messages. I think that contacting the SCA here in Dauphin County, they have a ton of prevention programs. They can come and do in your schools. They can help you with parent resources. I think that's another great way to start. If you don't know where to start, let us kind of guide you. I think it's a big topic, and you know, it's not something that everyone's comfortable discussing over meatloaf.
How should you deal with norms or rites of passage around underage drinking? Like, you know, I'm turning 21, and so I'm going to go out drinking with my parents.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think that that is a family decision that needs to be discussed. So I think you have to look at the kid and the adolescent that we're talking about. If they've had previous involvement with problems with drugs and alcohol, that should be a discussion that, you know, we're worried about you, we're concerned. If it's a rite of passage, make sure you're having discussions about those safety tips of how we keep ourselves, no drinking and driving, make sure we're Ubering. But again, providing that education. You know, I told you we talked to our son since he's been 8 years old about drugs and alcohol, and he literally was sitting at we had a fire in a fire pit this weekend, and he said, when I go to college, I don't want to go to any college parties. Just out of the blue, and I was like, this is awesome, right? Like, where did this come from? Like, we were making s'mores, like, and all of a sudden he's like, I don't want to go to any college parties. I'm like, that's great. So we talked about that. Why did you come to that decision? What made you think about those types of things? So having those open discussions again, and making them feel comfortable to have those conversations. Again, that was over s'mores, not prompted, nothing. So.
Okay. Why do youth continue to use alcohol when they know it's wrong?
I think the main reasons that we see are peer pressure. I think the other things that they see are socially feeling awkward. I think this has been made 100 times worse with COVID. We haven't had the ability to interact the way that we have socially, which is a big part of adolescence. And a lot of times adolescents now, I don't remember a time my son actually picked up the telephone when I called him. He only texts or sends messages. So, you know, not being really able to communicate with their peers. So alcohol opens that up and makes that a more natural feeling expression for them, which is absolutely not true. The other thing that a lot of these people do is it's associated with certain things. I know some of the areas, there's always a big Halloween party in the Steelton area. All the adolescents go there, and it seems to be a place where it's just, you come to that party, you're drinking. So, you know, talking to them about like those known places as not a place to frequent and why.
We talked about PAYS data and how it says that most kids get their alcohol from their parents. So why, I know this is part of the reason why kids think it's okay, that their parents think it's okay that they drink alcohol. What would be some other reasons why they think that?
I think that they look at, kids learn by observing others. So I think a lot of it comes from older siblings. So if they had older siblings, we have a lot of kids who are 15, 16 years old who have older brothers and sisters in college, and their parents allow them to go for the weekend and hang out with a sibling where that's just a normal behavior. Also what they observe at home. If their parents drink, it's normalized. I've had a lot of people that I've worked with through the years who come from large Italian families, and over Italian dinners, everyone drinks wine with dinner. That's just what they do. So you have to look at the cultural component and addressing that. I think those are the biggest pieces. I think that kids just have the opportunity because their parents did it, or their parents tell stories of when they were growing up and the things that they did, and they think they have to follow in those footsteps to be accepted by their parent.
Hi. So you talked a little bit about addiction being predicated on the age of first use. The earlier you start, the more likely you can become addicted. Can you talk a little bit about why young people shouldn't start drinking in the first place, and maybe the role of epigenetics?
Sure. So for many, many years when we talked about addiction, we thought it was a moral flaw of character, and what we realized through science is that's absolutely not the case. So we know that we are made up of 50% of our father and 50% of our mother in our genes. And our genes don't change over time, they're part of us. But what we do know is that there's a newer study that really started to come about in the 70s, but only really began to be popular in the 90s. If you've been around a long time, it goes back to the old school nature versus nurture. So the nature concept is we're born with what we are, and if our parents were alcoholics or had diabetes, we were going to get it too. That's the nature kind of point of view. The nurture point of view takes into consideration, and epigenetics specifically, is that the things that our grandparents did are passed along in our genes to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation. Environmentally, depending what happens to us, depends if those genes are expressed or not. So if I have an adolescent whose mother's bipolar, when they come into me, they're like, well, I'm screwed, I'm going to be bipolar too. The reality is that's not necessarily the case. You have a higher likelihood of developing bipolar disorder, but unless something happens to trigger that genome or that thought process, you're not going to develop bipolar disorder. So a lot of these genetic tags that get stuck on us are environmental tags. So if your parents smoke, if they ate poorly, if they love to run, those types of tags stick to us and get passed on. So what we're doing now is essentially impacting our great-grandchildren. So sorry, not sorry, I'm not sure if I should apologize for that. But that's like a real thing. I didn't make that up. Look it up, epigenetics.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So how, if an adolescent asked you about refusal skills, how am I going to refuse drugs or alcohol when I'm at a party or when I'm hanging around with my friends, what do you tell them?
So I think the biggest thing that we work with them on is coming up with a safe word or a word that they say that gets them out of that situation. They can text it to a parent, the parent can come and get them. They can text it to a friend. Sometimes it's a gesture. I think that's probably the biggest thing, and also having a plan of what you're going to do ahead of time. So like play out scenarios. When I was in grad school, I hated role playing, but it actually has a point of it in therapeutic practice. Of role playing, like what if you're at a party? What's going to happen? How are you going to say no? What are you going to do? Putting those words into real life experiences helps them a lot. When we run adolescent programming, something that we used to do was we had them come up with weekend plans in which they laid out what they were going to do for their weekend and who they were going to call if they felt like they needed to use or were in a situation to use. We also encourage young people to go to 12-step meetings that are appropriate for young people and get a sponsor so they have somebody else to talk to if they're in active addiction.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
The mouse worked and then it didn't work. Sorry, I don't know what happened. There's magic.
Really? It didn't?
It did, but then it didn't. Battery's gonna die. It's cool.
Thank you, Amanda, for your presentation. It was awesome. We might have to have you come back and do some more. We just wanted to close out with just talking a little bit about prevention. Also to remind you that Amanda works for Gaudenzia, and she also does adolescent counseling. She does adolescent counseling also in Schaffner Youth Center, as well as what
All the schools minus Upper Dawn.
all the school districts minus Upper Dauphin. And do you do any in your facility?
We do at our Harrisburg location, and also if you're from Up County, we have some in Middleburg, which is a different county, but we also have services up there for adolescents.
Okay, thank you. So just some information about prevention. We work with 6 federal strategies. Our first strategy would be information dissemination. We come to events and have a table with information about drug and alcohol use, any type of programs we have, and any services we can give you. We do that within the schools and communities. All services are in schools and communities of Dauphin County. We also do educational programs. We have evidence-based programs and evidence-informed programs, such as 5 life skills, Too Good for Drugs, Too Good for Violence, among other programs, which we can give you a list if needed. We also do what is called alternative activities. Alternative activities is when someone comes and does some type of exciting event other than using drugs or alcohol, so it's an alternative. We also have a lot of end of the year events, and that's where our alternative activities come in. We do information dissemination. We also do problem identification and referral. Problem identification and referral we mainly do in the schools through the student assistance program. We have a liaison for each school, and they go out and go to the meetings and also see kids that are referred, and they get parent permission. Also, we do community-based process, which is going to different meetings and organizing with other people to help them do prevention activities and events and presentations. And last but not least, we also do environmental activities. Our main one is social norming, where we try to let kids know that it's not, something that a lot of people, well, everyone does as far as using drugs or alcohol. So we take the statistics from the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, which is given to students in 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grades. And that's where we get a lot of our information on what we need to have at the different schools and the communities. So if you have any questions or any other information you would like to get from us, our contact number is 717-635-2254. And also you can reach us through any of our social media sites, or you can just email us. My email address is dbaylor@dolphinc.org, or you can just always call our main number and just ask for me. We appreciate you watching this presentation, and hopefully you will be able to get something out of it. Please use this for the adults that are around you and not really show it to your adolescents to get any ideas. We just really wanted to focus on the parents